Good afternoon everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the community services and development industry in Australia. We're going to break apart a fair bit of data today. So I'm going to give you some instructions a little bit later on, but realistically I do want you just to sort of kick back, listen to the information and really think about how you can use it to better position yourself as a subject matter expert. Ultimately, what I want you guys to do is to be able to walk away from this session and really clearly know what the supply and demand skews look like within this category, what you can sort of expect in terms of supply and demand moving into the future, so how easy or difficult it may be to resource for in particular categories within this discipline, but also know how to use the information so you can really build out some robust job briefs with hiring managers. Because I guess what I want you to do is really think about, if we're going to take a job brief, how are we going to execute it perfectly first time? The worst thing that could possibly happen, and it's happened to all of us before, is that we can start out building out a job brief, take a really narrow, fine, refined brief, and then go and look for that needle in a haystack and then fail miserably. So what we want to do is sort of think about, what are all the complications, what are the challenges that may present us, and what do we know and how do we access that information? So today is all about data, and we're going to step through a fair bit. Some of you have just joined us now, so please don't scribble madly. I'm going to send you a copy of this presentation tomorrow. We'll also save a copy of the recording, so if there's anyone in your business that may have missed it, we'll be able to share that information with them as well. But to get started, I guess I'll give you a little bit of information about myself. If you guys haven't been to one of my events over the last few years, my name's Narelle Stefanak and I'm the National Client Training Manager at Seek. So I cover Australia and New Zealand, so if you do operate in the New Zealand market, we rolled out the New Zealand version of this presentation earlier this morning, so let me know if you want to get your hands on that copy as well. But in terms of my background, I've been with Seek for a very long time. I was very young when I started. This is my 11th year with the business, and really want to sort of focus in on, what does talent sourcing best practice look like and how has that evolved over time, and what intelligence do we capture at Seek that we can really share with you guys so you can make better hiring decisions. Prior to Seek, I worked in the recruitment industry for a number of years as well, have done everything from being a recruitment consultant through to a branch manager. So we try to apply really tactile and usable insights so that we can get you the best outcomes. Now, in terms of communicating with me today, we will give you a way to ask questions on the way through, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But if you have anything that's a little bit curly, or if you just want to take it offline and ask some questions after today's event, email me, call me, you can tweet me. I'm happy for you guys to tweet me directly at Narelle Stefanak or via the @SeekJobs handle. And we do have a blog which you guys can access. I post articles on there, but so do a range of other experts within the talent acquisition space. So by all means, go into that blog. It's called insight.seek.com.au, and we'll keep you up to date with what's happening. Now, in terms of how we're going to do it today, just ask questions as we go. Okay, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, yep, that sounds like me, or I don't really know how that would relate, or I have a particular question around where we source that data from, throw it at me. I'm happy to take anything offline and really go and explore those questions that you have. You can do that just by clicking on the little red box with the white arrow. It'll open up a questions area for you if you haven't seen it already. So type away. What I'll do is I'll pause in between slides and I'll answer as many questions as I can throughout the whole presentation. And then at the end, we'll allow about 5 minutes to answer questions as well. Now, if this is your first time actually dialing into one of these styles of industry insight webinars, we've actually been doing them for a while, so you might be curious to see the other industries that we've covered. So across all of our classifications, we have 30 classifications. We've covered basically the top 20 so far in 2014. If any of these relate to you and you want to get the more detailed granular findings, email me, we'll send you through a copy. In terms of what we're going to cover this year, there's still another 8 for us to cover. So if any of these are of interest, let me know and we'll make sure we invite you to those events as well. But in terms of how today is going to work, there's really 4 main buckets that we're going to cover. The first one is all around industry insights, and to gather this sort of information, I like to use independent data, and there's probably one really good source that we like to use is the Department of Employment, and there's a number of different bodies that roll up the findings out of there to be able to publish them in a very usable way. And so there's two. One is called the joboutlook.gov.au, and the other is the LMIP, which is a Labour Market Information Portal. I use both of these when sort of exploring the category further. If you want to know more about those sources, let me know, but I've got all references all the way through the presentation. So by all means, just click on the links and you'll be able to find all the details you need. But I'll step you through what the industry looks like as a whole, how it's moved over time and what they're predicting for the next 5 years. The next three buckets is really where we focus on SEEK data. And the benefit of SEEK data in comparison is that national data or independent data is usually rolled up on an annual basis, whereas SEEK data is month to month. So we can give you almost real-time indications of supply and demand, what salaries are on offer, what the behavioural traits are of individuals. So just being able to stay in touch with this sort of data is going to be important. And I'm going to show you how you use it as a lever to be able to really control your talent sourcing programs. So we're going to break those into two main components and we'll step through each of them. It'll take a good 20 to 25 minutes to move through all of that information, and then we'll have about 5 minutes at the end. So we better jump into things, hey? All right, the first part that we really want to talk about is this independent research. So the industry insights produced by the Department of Employment, but then sort of broken apart and refined by the joboutlook.gov.au and also by LMIP. One thing that they actually look at, which is quite interesting, is this historical trend. So basically what we're looking at is how is the number of people who are employed over this in this category, how has that evolved over time? Now, the Department of Employment is really indicating that there's been quite strong growth in this category. It's up 21% over the last 5 years, and it is expected to continue. Now, it's not that surprising, I guess, when you compare that. You know, we've got an aging population, there's the strong growth in the healthcare sector as a whole, and community services really play sort of like a counter lever in the healthcare sector. So when we break apart just this community services, when we're looking at roles like aged care, disabled care, welfare and support workers, social workers, all those types of roles, we definitely see that this category has been in growth, and in terms of the scale of growth that we're expecting over the next sort of 5 years is quite sizable. It's going to go another 24.5%. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a rationalisation piece in a moment when we look at the profiling, but this is basically 3 to 4 times the national growth rate that's predicted for the next same time period, 2013 to 2018. So I guess the key thing to be thinking about at this point, if we're looking at this really big macro trend across the entire industry as a whole, is that if you found it hard in the last 5 years to resource people for your roles, it's only going to get harder. Okay, don't want to kill the mood, but ultimately it is going to become more difficult. Okay, because there's going to be more people employed in this category, and the absolute number of growth, over 63,000 new roles are expected to be created over the next few years. So really understanding how difficult this is and managing the hiring manager's expectation up front is going to be key when you're thinking about what strategies do we need to deploy. Now, I'm going to show you where this growth sort of sits. Okay, so it's because it's not even balanced, not 24.5% across every single role cluster. And these aren't the SEEK classifications. We're still working off the Department of Employment's role clusters, and they have a good 1,000 different clusters across all industries. So what we're talking about here is the biggest hiring category, which is the aged and disabled carers. That is going to also have the largest percentage growth, 32%. Absolutely massive. It's going to be significantly difficult to be able to find talent in this category. So if you're hiring here, you need to think outside the square. Okay, what you've been doing for the last 5 years may not work for the next 5 years. Okay, what can you do to break the status quo? What can you do to step outside your comfort zone and really try and do things differently? Because you're going to need to. Not only is there a shortage of talent, but there's also going to be a high turnover and a greater demand. Okay, we've got an aging population. Everyone's been talking about it. It's only going to quicken over the next decade. So we've got to be prepared for that. So let's break apart what it actually looks like in comparison to the national average. Okay, so the other thing that the Department of Employment do really, really well is in this joboutlook.gov.au website, they produce these one pages with information that breaks down all of these components, how many people are employed in the category, what their educational profile looks like, what their gender looks like, how old they are, what percentage are working full-time. You know, they give you a really good saturation of information. And I'm going to show you one by one each of those. It might be a little bit tedious, but I'll try and sum it up for you pretty quickly. So the first thing to call out is this prediction of growth in employment across Australia over the next 5 years. Okay, the average prediction across all industries is 7.2%. So you can see that this industry in particular is going to grow significantly faster than that. All right, so if we look at Asian disabled carers, I guess the big call-outs here is, yes, it's very strong growth, so it's 32% growth, it's almost 5 times the national average, but the qualification and skill level is a Cert 3 or 4. Okay, it's predominantly male, more of the older demographic, age 45 to 54 employed in this group, and a lot of them are working part-time or a casual basis. Now, the thing to think about here is if you have a hiring manager that says, I only want someone who's degree qualified, well, they're ruling out the largest bucket of candidates. So this would be a lever that you'd be able to push back on. Okay, well, you say you want someone degree qualified, but the reality is the majority of people employed in this role would only have a Cert 3 or 4. So why would we want to limit our opportunities or our options here? So that's how you'd start to sort of push and navigate your way through there. The next one, which is welfare support workers, also very strong growth, also a Cert 3 or 4, still female dominant and still that same age bracket. Okay, very, very similar. However, these guys are more qualified. They typically be employed full-time and earning a bucket load more, okay, in comparison, although it does sort of wash out to around the national average in terms of earnings. Social workers. Okay, so we're looking at strong growth, okay, around 11%, bachelor degree qualified, still female demographic. Health and welfare service managers, very strong growth, 24%, and same age group, 45 to 54, predominantly female still and still full-time. Welfare, recreation, community arts, strong growth, female, younger demographic, 35 to 44. Not the youth, but sort of the next level down in terms of who would be most likely to work in that category. All right, the next one, special care workers. We're looking at very strong growth with 14%. Female dominant, 35 to 44-year-olds, so same sort of demographic or age bracket. And the last one, finally the men get a show in here, Indigenous health workers, predominantly male. In this particular category is much smaller category, so being able to get appropriate sample size for earnings was not achievable by the Department of Employment, so that has not been included in this particular report. But this is just a nice little cross-section that I like to put out so that at a glance you can sort of know, okay, what is the skill qualification, who are we targeting? You know, if you're looking at diversity challenges and you want to try and get more males in, then this will give you a reason to be able to do that. Conversely, if you're looking at Indigenous workers, if you want to get more females in for diversity reasons, then that might be a good lever, a good trigger to remind you. So this is a nice little one. When you get the deck later today, make sure you print it out, stick it up on the wall. It'd be really helpful. All right, so supply and demand. What we want to talk about here is the SEEK-based data and really understand the candidates that we're trying to source. Are they going to be hard to find or easy to find based on how competitive it is to source those candidates and also the sheer supply of them, right? So ultimately, we're trying to intersect that supply and demand curve so that we can really understand how much we need to manage that hiring manager's expectations. So the easiest way for us to measure it is through average applications per ad. Okay, if we get a low average applications per ad, we would assume that'd be very difficult to resource for. If we're getting higher average applications per ad, then we'd see that there'd be more flow, there'd be more candidate interest, there may be less demand, so you're not competing with as many people, so therefore you'd have a greater influx of candidates. And knowing this will inform the way that you go about sourcing these candidates, so the sourcing strategy you deploy. So the way that I would look at this graph is I would say, okay, where do I think I'm going to have the most amount of pain? Okay, if I'm looking for managers, if I'm looking for Indigenous or multicultural specialists, if I'm looking for people in community development, these are pockets where I can see quite easily that they're getting a lower average applications per ad. So in that instance, I may need to push back on the hiring manager a little bit. Okay, if they're looking for a manager, we should be able to turn around and say, well, managers are the most difficult role to resource for nationally. So I need you to be a little bit flexible with me here. What are you willing to look for? What skills do we need? What experience do we need? What educational level and why? What are we willing to pay? Where would we go if we can't find the talent locally? Really start to open up the dialogue, because we need them to understand that these candidates are in short supply, either because there's just too few of them or there's just so much more competition for them. Now, the other thing to think about if you're not doing it already is, how are we going to do it? Are we just going to run a job ad? Is a job ad going to get us the results that we need, or should we actually be searching for talent? Now, there's a number of businesses that just aren't aware that when you sign a contract with Seek, you get two things. One is the ad itself, and the other part is the capability to search off the back of that ad. Okay, so we call that talent search. So ultimately, the moment that you post your ad, what we do is we run it through our 3 million profiles of candidates that say, hey, we're happy for companies to reach out to me. And then we store a really refined list of those candidates in our Seek Talent Search platform, just waiting for you to go in there and have a look through them and refine them, okay, in a myriad of different ways, so that you can proactively search for the talent you want and then decide how you want to connect with them. Now, if you're not doing that at the moment because it's new and you just hadn't heard of it before, please let us know. Take it offline. It's free. So it's just part of your contract with Seek. We really strongly encourage you to be using it where the supply of talent is short, where you're finding it very difficult to resource for talent, so you're getting a mismatch. So you might run an ad, but all the wrong candidates are applying, so you need to have some control back. Or even where you think you're going to get saturated with candidates and you think, oh, I just want to be able to tap into the ones that I want rather than going through volumes and volumes. So that's where I'd start to think about what that talent sourcing mechanism looks like. Now, I've had a question, is the hardest job to source the same by state? No, not necessarily. So if you want state-based data, I will be cutting state-based data in the next 2 months, and I will be publishing it on our blog. So if you specifically only recruit within a particular state, by all means let me know, and I'll make sure we get those data sets out to you. But yes, you can. This is a national lens as we're running a national webinar, but we can absolutely cut our data at a state level. And they do change. To be honest, it's not a massive skew. Age and disability support will probably still be down the far right-hand side, but that may shuffle depending on the location that you're in. All right, so also had an earlier question from Dave just regarding the healthcare industry. So yes, we've covered 20 different industries and healthcare is one of them. So if you guys also need to see the healthcare discipline, email me and I'll make sure I send you the breakdown data for that industry as well. Now, what if you can't find them? Where do you go? We have state-based splits for you. Okay, so we've taken out the top 3 here. We can do it for any of the occupations, but management, Indigenous and community development were the 3 most difficult roles to resource for on that list based on average applications per ad. And what we've done is we've said, okay, well, if people are looking at job opportunities, where are they doing that? Where are they interested? So that at least we know where we would go if we can't source talent locally. So if you're in New South Wales and you're looking for someone in community development, I'd be targeting Victoria as your next biggest market. You can see there's a massive jump between New South Wales and Victoria in terms of the sheer engagement volume of candidates. So where we're counting these is not when someone does a search, but when someone's gone to the effort to click on that summary and move through to the body of the ad. That's when we've counted it as an engaged ad detail view. And we can start to get a really good gauge of where the greatest interest is. Even with New South Wales, you're very level with Queensland. So, if you're going to target anywhere, probably Melbourne first and then probably look at your Brisbane market after that. So understanding where you are, I mean, if you're in Queensland and you're not finding the talent locally, then you might say, okay, well, which market do I choose? Okay, would we be willing to consider someone from a Victorian or a New South Wales market? And if so, would we pay relocation costs? Would we pay sign-on bonuses? Would we match salaries based on those markets? So you can see how the dialogue really evolves with your hiring manager based on just asking a few extra questions off this data set. Now, the next really important component is salary. So if you understand what's out on offer in the marketplace, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to know if you're going to be competitive or not. So we're going to give it to you. When you post your ads on Seek, we ask you for your minimum and your maximum salary band. And what we do is we collate this on a monthly basis. So this data is from January. And what we look at is what's on offer. So what are people seeing out there? So if you're looking at management roles, they're getting paid anywhere between 81 and 96,000 on average, right? So that's the sort of salary band that they'd be seeing. So if you're looking for a manager and you're only willing to pay $70,000 a year, you may struggle. And this again may be a talking point. So if you're talking to your hiring manager, they say, we're looking for a manager. Okay, well, managers are the most difficult role to resource for nationally. The lion's share of candidates aren't here in New South Wales, they're in Victoria. So would we be willing to pay relocation costs or sign-on bonuses? And also our salaries may not be competitive enough because the average salary offering is between 81 and 96,000 and we're only willing to pay 70. So we're going to be right behind the eight ball. Explain to me what you need from this manager. What can we negotiate on? Does it have to be a senior level? Could we take an entry-level manager? Could we take someone who could succession plan up into a management level? Will we provide any mentoring capability so we can take someone more junior? Or if you want someone more senior, can we just pay him more cash? Right? Sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes it's not. So basically just being able to explore a lot more around, okay, well, the reality of the situation is that we may not be competitive enough to get what you want. So don't send me on a wild goose chase. Let's rein it back in and let's have a serious plan of attack around how we're going to do this, how we're going to execute it. And then ultimately you'll know what room you've got to move, and then you can decide what you need, what content you need to put in your ad, but also what search mechanisms you need to trigger. So when you're using the Seek Talent Search platform, are you just going to send them the job in isolation? Are you going to send them a really detailed, customized message so candidates can engage with you? Are you just going to download their CV and have a hard conversation with that candidate straight up? All of this stuff is going to be really, really important. So we've had a question from Rosie. Are these total packages inclusive of super or just base salary? We encourage people to list just base salary only. So these should be base plus super. Okay, so super would be on top of this component. So, but ultimately it's what you guys put in, right? So if someone's included super in some of them, then that will get clustered in. But the expectation is that it would be a base plus super, and the reason why we encourage that is because that's how candidates think. So for candidates coming into our site, they don't go, oh, what's my salary package inclusive of super? It's very rare for that to occur. What I'd be more inclined to do is say, this is the base, and if you pay more than the normal super, so the legislated super amount, so if you're paying more than 9.5%, then I would be communicating that. All right, so we're going to move on to this final section, and we're going to look at search behaviours and how they've evolved, because it's actually quite interesting. One of the things that we've seen in the last 5 years in particular is this massive shift to mobile. So to put it in perspective, 5 years ago, less than 2% of our ad volume was via a mobile device. Today, it's more than 54%. Now, the last published figure I have is 54%, but that was back in October 2014. I dare say that's closer to 60% by now. We'll be releasing another figure later this month or early in March around what the actual number is. Basically, we're saying that mobile now dominates. Okay, so they're more likely to visit Seek via a mobile device than they are through a desktop computer, which is a pretty massive shift. The other thing that we need to consider in that instance is that It's 108 times more difficult to read content on a mobile device than it is a desktop screen. So how do we make it easier? How do we make it more legible? You know, all of these things around structure, the way that you write, the way that you script is going to be pretty key in terms of creating engagement through a mobile environment. If you want more coaching on ad writing and how to really do it effectively, because ultimately you post one ad and we send it out to every single device you could imagine. So we have an iPhone app, we have an Android app, we have an iPad app, we have a mobile site, we have obviously a desktop as well. So everything is covered for you with your one job ad. But even though we will make it mobile ready, the amount of content that you put in, the way that you structure it will have a massive impact. If you want more training on ad writing, my next ad writing webinar will be in April. So keep an eye out for that. David's asked, is this across all sectors or just community services and development? David, it's across all industry sectors. However, I did ask for industry splits and it wasn't that interesting to publish because it's identical. So I'll give you an example. We know out of our 30 classifications that 10% of searches are for administration. Okay, so that's a pretty big category. For admin and office support, there's 10% of all of our searches. Now, if we split that by, well, how many are desktop bound and how many are mobile bound, and is there a difference? The answer is no. And then we did that for every single classification, and we worked out that across all of them, the change of difference is less than 1%. Okay, so if say admin, that's the example. Let's take accounting, for example. That might be 5% of searches on desktop, it's 4%, on mobile, it's 5%. Yeah, so it's within a 1 percentile that it's different. So there's really no story there. Pretty much everyone who's on desktop is largely on mobile as well and vice versa. We've had another question. Have you got a breakdown of mobile visits by sector? I'm sure that there are some sectors that are more mobile savvy, and sorry, I just answered that question, but it's really interesting. We thought so too, and in fact, when we first launched mobile back in 2010, 2011, there was a skew. We absolutely saw early adopters, but that has pretty much eroded, and we see that all disciplines are equally represented across both. Okay, and we've had a request for the ad writing. That's fine, no worries. We'll get back to you on that one. All right, so let's talk about how they search. Okay, really interesting is that you can see those three blue bubbles, they don't add up, right? 70% use keyword, 72% use location, 55% use classification. They use multiple buckets when they search. The really interesting piece, though, is that location is really key. It's important to use the granular location where you can, and also if you can list the suburb, we don't give you the opportunity to list your suburb yet, but if you put it in the body of your ad, we actually surface it for candidates. So if candidates say, I'm looking for a job in, let's say, Sunshine, okay, so then we can actually pull Sunshine out of your ad and then render it back to the candidate. So by all means include the suburb where you can. In terms of keyword, this used to be really minor. Okay, it used to be less than 30% of searches incorporated a keyword. It's now up to 70% because people are really comfortable with it. They're used to using Google search, and the Seek platform works very similarly. So people will put it in, but what we're finding is it moves into a couple of key clusters. So I'm going to show you those clusters now. So for community services, there's 5 really big buckets. So we're talking about role title, industry, the skill, and then also the seniority and the work type. So these are the main things that people will typically search by or use a keyword search to do. But you'll see all the terms sort of make sense. They're pretty basic. There's nothing there that's too creative. And that has to be your key. When you're going to craft content and you're thinking about what would candidates search for, they're using terms that are generic, that make sense. They're not using fancy terms. So if you have a fancy job title, change it. It's not going to connect with those target candidates. Okay, if it's a social worker, call it a social worker. If you want someone in mental health, make sure you include that in your ad. So these are the sorts of things that are going to pop up. So really challenge internally. If you think you've got a bit of a fancy job title, I'd be challenging it and saying, you know what, are they really the chief executive officer in charge of people? Because maybe they are a social worker instead. So thinking about how we really challenge some of that dialogue and that language that we use could really help you just create some efficiencies with attracting the right level of candidate. So what I'm going to leave you with today is probably the three main takeouts. And the first one is I want you to walk away and know that you can now be a subject matter expert. Okay, you understand independent data and how this category has grown over time and how it's predicted to grow into the future and how it relates back to each of those roles. You know what roles are either difficult or easy to resource for based on the SEEK data, and then also where those candidates are that may have been in that critical undersupply bucket or hard to source. As a result, I want you then to apply it to those conversations that you have with hiring managers. Okay, really challenge them, push them. Say, you know, I understand, I can hear what you're saying, but we're going to have challenges, so we need to be prepared for that. And then really think about what brief you're both going to agree to. Because I don't want you to start a brief that on a wild goose chase and then come back and realize I'm just going to have to do it all again and reset the expectations or negotiate the expectations. If you can get it right first time, it'll be so much more efficient for you and all the candidates that you get exposed to. And then finally, really challenge how you do things. Okay, what you've done in the last 5 years may not work for the next 5. So what else could we be doing? How do we diversify the way that we source talent? Do we need to be building talent pools? Does talent acquisition work for us at the moment, or have we got broken processes? Do we really need to think about streamlining them, making them more efficient? So really challenging that process can help. So I'm going to end the session there for those of you who need to escape because we're right on time. And for those of you who'd like to stay on, I'm going to answer the rest of the questions that have come through. So thank you again for joining us. And if you have any more questions, please pop them in to the question box now, and I'll make sure I stay on the line and answer them before you head off. Thanks, guys, and look forward to getting your feedback, and we'll send you a copy of this presentation tomorrow. All right, so let's answer some of these questions that have appeared. So Katie's asked, looking for people in employment services, we find we have lots of unsuitable candidates. Do you have any ideas on what keywords we should use? This role is vocational advisor, which is probably not a regularly searched keyword. Any advice would be appreciated. Yeah, I noticed that the employment services category was really low in terms of the talent pool. One thing that I'd be thinking about is where do people actually look? If they're going to work in the employment services, would they look more under recruitment? Would they look more under HR? Maybe this category may not be the best position for getting the wide pool of talent that you're after. It also may be just a challenging one. So in that sense, what I would be doing is I'd be searching for talent. Okay, you can't just rely on your job ad alone. The job ad has worked really, really well for years, and it will continue to work well. But where you have structural shortages of talent and you have to have people with specific skills and you don't want to attract a whole lot of noise, that's where talent search becomes extremely valuable. So if you're not familiar with that tool, let us know. We'll make sure we get you connected with it. It's free. All right, so Emily's asked, I'm an RTO. We deliver in Cert 3 in aged care. I have been doing extensive research in the expected growth in the aged care and DI's care workers. We would like to foster better relationships with employers of these roles and develop a system where they employ and pay for the worker to be trained versus looking for those who are already qualified. This would mean that they are employing the right person for the role versus only people qualified. How could we assist with this process? You know what, Emily, I think this is a brilliant question. And the reason why is because I guess SEEK's purpose is to help people live more fulfilling lives. And if we can help people who have a passion or a desire to work in the industry connect with the right employers, and if the employers have a massive hole and there's a gap, there's a skill gap between someone wanting to do it but they just don't have the qualification to do it, I think that's where you need to focus in talent pipelines. So establishing relationships with employers where you can facilitate that skill gap. And I think what you could do, and I'll show you for the rest of the guys who are still on the line, I would be using this particular website here. This is the one I was referencing before. It's called Job Outlook. And if you're looking for a particular role like social worker, if you type it into the keyword field, what happens is it gives you a bit of information about what you're actually after. So let's say social workers. And in here, it gives you a reports and links. And this is quite interesting piece to use. So you can start to understand specifically around this group, what is it that is going to be the problem? So the only way you're going to be able to get employers to buy into the idea that we have a problem and we need a solution is if you can demonstrate it through evidence. And I'd be using some of this information here that you can see on the screen in building out that problem statement and working with a couple of key companies to really get some momentum. What I would encourage is that all employers consider what do we require skills for and what can we do on the job. And the reason for that is because structural shortages are only going to deepen. Okay, we've done modelling on this. We know that we're currently sitting at around a 20% skills shortage here in Australia today. We expect that's going to escalate over the next 10 years. It may go up to around a 40 to 45% skills shortage. So that means it's going to be twice as hard to resource talent. So we need to think a little bit more laterally. It's always a learning curve. I don't have the perfect bullet solution for you, Emily, but I think it's definitely a dialogue that needs to start occurring. So great question. Maybe we could take it offline if you need to explore it a little bit further. We've got a question, Bertha, around how do we access Seek data. So we publish it on our blog, and the next range of dates where we'll be publishing data for all industries will most likely happen in June. So keep an eye out for that. And we've had another question. Our managers complain about a high level of unsuitable candidates who are applying to meet their DOL requirements. Any suggestions for targeting only suitable candidates? Yep, I would boycott. No, I wouldn't boycott. Look, I think if you have unsuitable candidates applying, that is a massive red flag to say, I need to take control of the sourcing process. And to do that, you need to talent search. So the moment your ad goes live, I'd be accessing that talent search platform, identifying the candidates with the right skills, and then pushing your ad out to them, pushing targeted messages out to them, and downloading the CVs of the candidates you want, rather than just hoping and praying that the right candidates apply. Now, the reality is that anyone can apply to a role, and that can be a blessing, and it can also be a bit of a curse. So if you find that you're getting inundated with applications that are not meeting your needs, then I would be screening those candidates. I'd be using really clear and succinct, maybe a maximum of 5 screening questions, which you can do. It's just part of the Seek process, so you can apply screening questions to your job ad. And that way you can apply some filters to determine, okay, are these candidates going to be right or not? How do we quickly move through them so we can get to the best quality first, and then worry about the others that don't meet our core-based needs second? So there's probably 2 things you can do there. Adam's asked, not really a question, but more of a comment. It would be great if Seek allowed a qualification match so that job seekers could identify their qualification, and Seek would identify all job vacancies which require or desire their qualification. This may be a bit off. It's actually not, Adam. It's a great suggestion. In fact, that's exactly what our data scientists are working on right now. And what we're doing is, because we've got these 3 million candidates that provide us their details and reach out to us and say, hey, yeah, we're willing to be approached for the right opportunities. We want companies to find us. What we're doing is we're able to identify, so this is a prototype at the moment and it's been working. We've been testing it out in the IT sector because there's lots of skills in that sector. We're identifying what are the skills, where do they exist within the candidate's CV, and then being able to extract where do those skills also exist within the job ad, and then we'll derive a match and be able to push the relationship together, if that makes sense. And we'll do that through some form of either notification or an EDM directly to that candidate, so that candidates are constantly being advised of roles that meet their capabilities, and we definitely see this being able to be applicable across a number of different industries. It's in pilot at the moment. It'll go into beta, which is basically a real live test this month, just within the IT industry to make sure we get it right, and then we'll start to look to roll it out. So great suggestion. In fact, when you finish today, if you have any more suggestions, let us know. We have a question on the survey at the end that says, if you would like to participate in any of our product research, please let us know, and we'll add you to our product research list and then get in contact with you. So if that's something of interest for you, definitely let us know. Excellent. And Dave's also asked, keen to look at your previous webinars on ad writing. So I'll make sure I send through a link for that, Dave, to you. So guys, thank you. That's the end of our question time. I'm going to wrap it up here. We've gone 10 minutes over, so I appreciate you staying on the line, and good luck with your talent sourcing strategies for 2015. I really want you guys to reach out and let me know if there's anything else you need. We'll be delivering a whole range of talent search skilling capability webinars in March. I think that we've got 4 different times and dates. So if that's something that you want to be across. The other component is ad writing. We run a whole range of industry insights, and I'll be running around the country across May and June delivering some live events that'll run for a good 3.5 hours. They'll be masterclass sessions, so really a deep dive into each of these subjects. So by all means, let us know. All of our events are free. Would love to have you there. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks, guys.